Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.
This is one of those evergreen topics, Joe, that you and I often talk about. Sometimes we discuss it on the show with Sam, and sometimes we even speak off mic about it. And on a recent show, you had mentioned that you were increasing your rates for your recurring billing, whether that's a managed service product that includes something like Adigy or some other MDM product, and then adding things to it. So in my base offering to my clients, I offer them Adigy, and part of that also is Watchman monitoring. And then that includes Backblaze. I've been pretty successful deploying Backblaze groups and building that into my offering as a base offering. And then most recently, via Adigy, the Malwarebytes identification of malware and removal tool, where that happens automatically, identification and remediation, and that's through the OneView portal. And that's actually worked out really well for me. So I've got this base offering, and I put a pretty healthy number on it. And just as a point of comparison, I had a offering that just included Adigy and Watchman. I've pretty much increased my rate 2x as a base offering to my clients, and I've been really successful. I know that you're a pretty cautious consultant, and we always need to raise our rates or consider raising our rates in a very delicate fashion. But just in the last year or so, I've bumped everybody into this new base plan, and we have other things that we could build on top of that if the client wants to even expand on that. For instance, like DNS filtering and a managed portal where they could see all their passwords. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of my clients really blinked when I bumped up my rates significantly because of this value that I was giving them. Oh, and the other final thing that I was adding into this base offering was I was discounting off of my hourly rate. My hourly rate's pretty high, and they get a significant discount, something to the tune of 20%. So most of the people that agree to sign on with this, I don't really need to do remote work with them or on-site work on a recurring basis. So sometimes that seeing that reduced hourly rate is attractive to them because they think, oh, I could save money if I need to get some services either remotely or on site. But ultimately, most of these people just roll along just fine, just getting the managed services that we're providing on a monthly basis. So it's been a real positive step for me moving forward just to go with monthly billing, and I'm doing that through Square. There's certainly other gateways that you could do that. Square makes up a nice little recurring invoice, and my client could put the credit card on file. There's also a place where you can actually check off a box and say, if the client wants to tip you, they can do that. And interestingly, I've had a client who does that quite regularly. And so that's also a really nice kind of thing. So there's a lot here. And I just want to urge listeners, if you're very reticent to make some changes in your business that can move the needle financially, I say dive in feet first. I think people value something that they pay a little bit more for than something that appears to be just a bargain plan.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Jerry. And by the way, I just took your advice, diving in feet first. I just increased my company plan live on my website just as we're speaking. I just increased the rate again because I was calculating my own numbers and thinking to myself, this is too low. The kind of entry point is just too low. And I don't do that without a lot of forethought. So I had been thinking about this every time I was pitching a client. I looked at my rates as I'm calculating it and writing it up. And I've been thinking, Really? I could have sworn I was charging more than that. I realized that I was not charging where I should have been charging, because I think what you're describing is along the lines of how we do business, at least the three of us on the show. As I've said in the past, I don't compete on price, I compete on value. Our starting point is higher, and it's taking a page out of Apple's playbook, where they don't have the low-end Mac cut all the specs down to their bare minimums, and it's not really a great computer, but it's like an okay computer, and it starts at around $500, and it won't last very long. Lower build quality, but it's an entry-level price point. They don't do that. They don't have that. They don't compete on the low end. They compete in the middle to the high end of the market. And I've actually been remarking with friends recently, isn't it amazing how long some of these Macs last? I have a family member who's using a 2012 MacBook Air still, and it's working great. And they really don't see any reason to replace it. And even though at some point you have to replace it because it doesn't support the latest Mac OS and therefore it's less secure, the hardware really does last for a really long time. And that's the way I look at my services as well, is that I don't compete on the low end. I'm not the place you bring your iPhone with the cracked screen and I replace the screen with third-party parts that are cheaper, and I try to undercut Apple's price for the same repair. It's a different business model. It's more than quality at that point. That's not the way we do things. We're a small team. We keep the quality very high, and we try to fix things, whether it's less so these days hardware, more so software. We try to offer solutions that last in the same way that Apple makes products that last. And in order to do that, you have to charge enough for it. You have to make your money up front, essentially. And you have to charge for the services you're providing on a regular basis. And so you're describing including things that really every client should have. And I think that philosophically, there shouldn't be the entry-level plan that's less than what you really want them to have, but cheaper. And then they can look at that and say, I'll just dip my toes in and I'll just get this cheap low-end plan. And yeah, it doesn't include backups and it doesn't include malware scanning and remediation, but I'll just hope for the best. I'll just hope that I never lose data, and I'll hope that I never click the wrong link and end up with malware. And this way I can save a little bit of money every month. But then what happens is they do click a malware link, or they do need to recover data, and they end up paying ultimately, whether it's in the cost of time, their time, in lost productivity, or just frustration, or they're paying for some kind of expensive data recovery or malware remediation done manually after the fact once it's infected and past the point, and you can't really give it a clean bill of health at that point. I think it makes sense to include as much as you want the clients to have as the starting point. And the way you described it was the idea of including across the board as a starting point, both Adigy and Watchman monitoring. So you've got the management and maintenance in there. Adigy handles the software updates, so you can more or less ensure that they are, if not getting the updates automatically because of Apple's MDM issues that we're remediating against right now, but at least with things like Nudge and other tools that you can deploy through Adigy to really make sure that they stay up to date, because we all know that's really important. With Watchman, you have slightly better improved monitoring and reporting on those issues that they may encounter. And then adding to that Malwarebytes OneView, so that you have the malware filtering and remediation, and Backblaze, so that they have a form of backup, at least one form of backup across the board. And in order to get to that level of comprehensive services and support, you really need to charge accordingly. I'm on board with that too, and I agree with you. I hope listeners hear this as a call to action to build out your plan so that they're as comprehensive as possible and they apply to as many people as possible, and of course charge accordingly for that.
Yeah, agreed. I came up with it wasn't very fancy, but a single page splash sheet, a PDF that I could attach to an email and say, if it was a client that we did have just a much simpler offering before, hey, we don't offer that plan anymore, and this is what we have, and take it or leave it sort of thing. And this is what we need. And if you don't want to do this, that's okay too. We're going to silently be able to remove Adigy and Watchman, and we're happy to work with you on a pay-as-you-go basis. And you've got a normal, healthy hourly rate, and you could charge them at that normal hourly rate. They don't get the discount, and work with them that way. We did have one semi-retired attorney, attorneys and doctors, right, are sometimes the bane of our existence, who said, yeah, I don't want to do this. Okay. And he's one of those people who really needs our help and our support along the way. So we said, okay, Tim, we're happy to work with you as we move forward at our hourly rate. Call us when you need us. And we haven't heard from him in probably about 6 months, and he may roll happily along for a while, and then eventually his day of reckoning will come, and he may call us or he may call somebody else. I know in your area where you and Sam are located, and we're all in Connecticut here, your area is a little bit more active, and I just wanted to ask your impressions. You shared with Sam and I a new business that recently came into your area, and the rates are significantly discounted, and these guys are branding themselves as, air quotes, geniuses. I don't think they're part of the ACN community, and it looks nice. If you went to their website, you didn't know anything about the Apple Consultants Network or certifications, and you looked at these guys, they look like friendly guys, and they've got some Apple branding, or they say that they deal with Apple products. There's pictures of them holding Macs. And I just was wondering what your feelings were. I know if somebody like that moved into my territory at a posted discounted rate, I'd be, oh man, how do we handle this? How do you deal with stuff like that? Emotionally, or just let's say I was a client in your area and I said, hey, I know that there are these other guys, they're geniuses, and their rate's $130 an hour, which is what they posted.
First of all, what's the saying? Receipts or it didn't happen. I want them to take an IQ test, and I'd want to see the results before I could vouch for any level of genius. But no, in all seriousness, as a consumer, I think competition is great. As a business owner, obviously, there's a little bit of a conflict there, because the more competition, the more it tends to have a downward pressure on rates. I do think it is good for competition. It keeps us all honest. It keeps us all more competitive in that way. So it is good for the consumer. It is good for our clients to have choices like that. And I've always run my business like it's whatever's best for the client. If there's something about the relationship with our clientele or a prospective new client that isn't a good fit, where they're not convinced that we're the best fit for them, then I'm not trying to cling tightly to that relationship. It may make me, if I were to lose a significant number of clients, it may make me question what the value is that I'm providing. But we're busy. We have many happy clients, and some of them have been with us for 20 years that we've been in business, or almost 20 years. Actually, some of them go back to before I started my business, for that matter. So those relationships are really strong in many cases, and that definitely is reassuring to realize that our clients are very happy, and they're not really necessarily shopping around solely based on price, certainly. And again, part of it is just that's the way we work, is we provide a very high value. And yes, we charge accordingly for it. And some clients don't want the comprehensive service. They don't want someone who's going to provide that level of very high-end care and attention. And they want something that's less expensive, and that's their primary goal. So if that's the case, then, and I'm not even necessarily saying that the quality wouldn't be there with these possible competitors, but just that they are charging less, and therefore I think that the structure would be different. There's no way that you can charge half of what we're charging and provide the same level of care and attention. It's just the business model wouldn't necessarily work in that way, and it certainly wouldn't be sustainable. So yeah, I'm not afraid of that competition.
As an ACN, Apple does have your back to a certain extent. So if you ever did come across, for instance, a website and you looked and you couldn't find any documentation that a particular business owner was part of the Apple Consultants Network and they were using Apple branding on their website, Apple's really vigilant about enforcing their trademark. And I am looking at this particular website that we're speaking about, and nowhere are they actually using the Apple logo. They're pictured with Apple components, both Macs and iOS devices, and they are actually using the Genius Atom symbol, but I don't think Apple actually has a captured trademark on that. They may, but who knows? So yeah, it's very difficult to compete with people hourly rate if they are indeed certified consultants and they do have a lower hourly rate. That makes it a little bit more challenging, but you can always bring this up to a customer that, yeah, this does appear like it's coming in to provide support at a lower price point, but you're getting value and you're getting credibility for the very fact that you're an ACN. And I know a lot of folks that listen to the show aren't ACNs, but this is one of those cases where it might actually prove to be advantageous to be part of the program, to compete with competitors who aren't that and are trying to drive the rates down.
I think it's an interesting case study to your lawyer client of yours who said it's not for him or he wasn't interested. And I think the way you put it, his bill will come due, so to speak, in the future, where you're going to pay one way or the other. If you position it as all or nothing, you're either signing up for this plan, and this is our starting point. It's not low. It includes all these things, and we charge for that. And then you get the real significant discount on the hourly rate. Why is that? Sure. Part of it is because there's monthly revenue coming in from the client. So you offset the hourly rate based on the revenue you have coming in. But it's also the fact that it's much more efficient when you have the relationship with the client and you work with them on a regular basis. So you have a good understanding of the way they work and the way their systems are currently configured, the software they're using, things like that. And also the status of things from the point of monitoring and maintenance, and you just know that things are handled. It makes dealing with them more efficient when they do call for help versus when you have no ongoing relationship and you have no idea of what has happened with their systems, if anything, in the last year or two since they last called you in a panic. Usually. And it's more taxing mentally. It's more demanding to try to then get up to speed with what's changed on their system or what hasn't, what should have changed that didn't, and be able to then accommodate them at that moment. And that's why they're paying the full rate. I think it makes sense in that case. Yeah.
Somebody reaches out that's on your plan and you need to work with them remotely. You already are connected to them, or the user engages you and then you connect to them. How many times? 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, in some cases, on the phone just to get remote access to a client, to get on their computer. And then you get on your computer and you realize they've accumulated all this technical debt. There's a little bit of pain and suffering just for the consultant to bust through the door just to connect to them. And then they might have a horrible internet connection and everything is just buffering. So many reasons why you can justify a discounted rate when working with somebody on a regular basis. The other thing is a lot of times these problems can be resolved remotely, and I'm happy to resolve the problem quickly and remotely. Sometimes I don't even charge the client for it and reduce my carbon footprint. I don't have to take a truck out and go to their house and maybe put on my booties and deal with a dog who's humping my leg. And there's so many advantageous reasons to establish a relationship, an existing relationship with a client, and offer them that benefit for that very reason. It's like a retainer almost. Yeah, whatever your number is, are you providing that same value month to month on an ongoing basis, or are you pretty much pocketing the lion's share of what the client is paying? You may be, but it's also a retainer too. Those people are bumped up to the top of the list. You give them prompt support. Not that you're going to sit on your hands and not call a potential new client. You're always going to treat your existing relationships with the kind of prompt service that they come to expect from you. So there's so many good reasons to justify a lower hourly rate for them.
Yeah, it's easy to be cynical about a business that's presenting something as a relationship. And when you're with us, you're family. It's easy to be cynical about that. But there's a real honest truth there where when you have that kind of relationship, so to speak, like in that you do hear from them on a regular basis, you do reach out to them on a regular basis. Maybe it's just with the Malwarebytes report that we remediated against this piece of malware on this machine this month, or any kind of report that you send about status. Here, proactively communicating with the client, here's your status. All these machines are up to date. This one still needs an update. This one, the backup is delayed. How would you like to proceed? And that kind of open dialogue, that kind of ongoing relationship really does provide more value to the client and make things much more efficient. Of course, the other cynical take on it is it's protection money. A retainer you could look at cynically as protection money. It would be a shame if something happened to your technology if you weren't paying us monthly to maintain it. If you're not paying us for this relationship, then all bets are off. And I hope nothing happens, but if it does, and it's a very careful line to walk between those two sides. But the way I've been looking at it is when I pitch this plan to a prospective new client or an existing client for that matter, you've listed some real specific things that we've talked about, like backups, malware remediation, management, maintenance, monitoring. Those kinds of things are really specific or in service offerings. But the other things you started to mention too, I think are worth including when you present this to a client. Now, I've always been hesitant to say, if you sign up, then you get priority response. But I've started to mention that the last few pitches that I've made, I've been including a line that says you get priority response and scheduling for time-sensitive issues. And then in parentheses, subject to availability. So maybe that sounds like a lot of hedging. It's like, we're going to do priority response and scheduling for time-sensitive issues. Who gets to decide if it's time-sensitive? A lot of the times you get the all-caps email urgent subject line, and it's, do I need to do anything about this? And it's the most mundane, non-issue kind of thing. The answer is no. Okay, so it's like, it wasn't urgent, really. But so who's making that determination? That's a fair question. And then, of course, by hedging it even more and saying subject to availability, obviously, I'm trying to just give us an out where, look, we're just humans. Sometimes somebody has a sick day. Sometimes we're just fully booked, and maybe we're fully booked with existing monthly relationship clients, or sometimes it's just off the street or whatever. But so I'm not sure I will always include that kind of hedging, but I thought officially it's good to say that, especially if it's a new client and I don't yet have a good read on what their expectations are or what their level of demand will be. Even just including priority response and scheduling and leaving it at that, I'm not saying that we're going to get back to you within 4 hours or whatever it is, we'll be on site within 4 hours for that matter. So there's no specific promise, but there's just the setting the expectation that you will be a higher priority, obviously, if we have this kind of relationship. And I think they would kind of infer that from the rest of the conversation, but by explicitly mentioning priority response and scheduling, I think that's worth calling out. The other thing I think you alluded to was easier support. And so I'm just actually calling out on a second line, unattended remote support. We may very well have unattended remote support with other clients, whether we have a VPN into their network or Apple remote desktop set up, or in some cases, we even have Adigy, even if they're not paying us monthly, because it's more efficient for us. Of course, that's debatable. And I know you probably have some strong opinions on that one too, but those are more the exceptions. And I think that actually calling out that with this relationship, with this monthly plan, we can have unattended remote support. I think that's a feature, not a bug. I used to think, are clients comfortable with this idea? Do clients know that we can just connect whenever we want, so to speak? When I let them know that we have unattended remote support, and for example, like I'm doing a migration to a new Mac and it's important to oversee it over time when I do those remotely, I let them know we're installing the software so that we have unattended remote support so we can see how the migration is going and check in without needing to call you. In the case of a corporate environment, sometimes we have their personal Mac enrolled as well. And I let them know this gives us unattended remote access to your system. And obviously, we only do that when you arrange that with us, not just randomly whenever we feel like it. There's always a conversation with the client or an email exchange. Okay, what time are you going to lunch? We'll connect then, that kind of thing. So there's an understanding there. But calling it out as a feature, saying this software offers unattended remote support, that's a feature that we can actually call attention to there. And then lastly, I include email support. I just mentioned email support because, again, I do a lot of email support for clients, whether they have a monthly plan or not. I answer a lot of questions through email. Sometimes it's, should I upgrade this? They've gotten an email from Parallels or something, and they ask me, should I go ahead and upgrade this? Or they say they're looking for a new Mac, and I help them. I assess their specs and I send recommendations. So there's a lot of email. I can spend all day on email sometimes. And as I said, I would probably do it anyway. But by actually calling it out as a feature of this offering, it also implies that I may not respond to every email request, or I may be more inclined to say, hey, let's set up a call for this if they're not on a monthly plan. But if they are on a monthly plan, sometimes they prefer just to send an email and get a response. Or sometimes I can do that for free. If they're on a monthly plan, I can give them plenty of guidance through email. Again, that's a feature. So how do you feel about those kind of more nebulous things like priority response, unattended remote, and email support?
I know that you have the tendency, and this is not a criticism, Joe, just an observation, to overanalyze some of these borderline cases where some client potentially could hang you out to dry because you said that you were going to do email support for quick fixes or phone support, and now you're charging me. My feeling is when I present this base package to my clients. I have a couple of key line items in this PDF that I mentioned, but I don't give them a laundry list of all the benefits. I give them a couple big 10 poles that support the 10. And this is why really you should be here. And I figure if those don't speak for themselves, then if I added 20 more reasons, that's not going to push them over the edge. And as far as somebody hanging me out to dry and saying, oh, you're charging me and you shouldn't have, I'm going to fight that battle when it comes up. And for the most part, maybe I've been lucky and maybe I'm an edge case, but I don't have these clients that are challenging me. And if they are, once or twice, that's fine. But if it comes up too often, then it's not a good match for me. And I just suggest that we part ways. For the most part, my clients believe some of them are very comfortable with unattended support. And other people think, oh, this person's going to be just dipping their toe in and watching what I'm doing from time to time. And I try not to make that conversation come up. I don't have enough time during the day just to take care of my regular clients to be snooping on people. It's not the way we do business. It's not the way you do business. You support medical offices, legal offices, corporations. This is not part of our procedures to be watching clients. So I think for the most part, if you do enter into a conversation and a client is asking about those specific things, I think you need to measure the client and really temper the conversation. And if you're really pressed really hard, again, maybe that's not a good match too. If they're worried about you observing them in some way, maybe they have reason to worry. So maybe that's not a good match either. You give them the major reasons why they should be on your maintenance plan, your managed service plan, and you try not to get too off in the weeds with the nuance and not worry about it. And you fight those battles when they come in front of you.
Yeah, that's really more the way I've been thinking about it lately. Again, like with the unattended remote support, do I want to call attention to the fact that we have that level of support? Actually, yeah, I do. I do want to position it as a feature because, like you say, clients that are working with us effectively oftentimes are asking for that, rather not have to be involved. They'd rather just send a quick email, make a quick phone call, send a text, whatever it is, and briefly describe the issue or just let us know that there is an issue and have us magically fix it, wave the magic wand. The less they have to be involved, the better. And also to your point, if they have something to hide and aren't comfortable with that in some way, that's probably going to make things harder for us and for them. And it's going to be less efficient and therefore more costly. And so less of a fit really. It acts as a filter. And again, if they do push back on that and say, I'd rather not have that, we can turn it off. So we turn off live desktop and Attitude to that client policy. That's possible. Or just reassess whether that we want to work with them because maybe it is a filter in that way and that it just ends up not being a good fit. And so we can have that conversation if we need to. But I'm all about these days just listing those features of the way we work. And if it's appealing to the client, then it's going to be a great fit, most likely.
There are clients that I deal with where I might say, I need to take a look at your computer. I'm getting some information about the backup not completing. Do I have permission to look at your computer, or can we set a time for me to take a look at your computer? So even though indeed I do have remote access, not every client is the same way or has the same personality. And sometimes I know that I need to ask permission, even though I could just go in there in the middle of the night and take care of it. The other thing I wanted to say was that revamping my offering and making sure that everybody's at this higher tier, it's not a hard sell. It's almost like they want to pay you this money. They want you to be sticky. They want you to take care of them so they can sleep at night. And that's partly how we approach it. We say we want to give you peace of mind on your computer, that you don't have to worry about all the horrible things that you read about with all the clickbait. And people are terrified all the time. They're terrified now about AI. And at least to know that we're there for them, I think they really value that peace of mind that we can provide for them.
Yeah, the way you described it as a retainer, they know that we're going to be there because we have the motivation to keep them happy because they're paying us for that service. They're paying us for our availability. They're paying for our priority response. And they want to know we're there because they are a little afraid in the background about all of this stuff, whether it's the coming AI apocalypse or just the day-to-day issues that everybody is facing where, something could go wrong. I could be without my technology functioning for a time. And how will I function in life if I don't have my technology? Yeah, they want to know, they want to have that piece peace of mind that we are going to be there. And yeah, I do think that does make a lot of these sales for us. The client having trust in us that we are capable and that we are there. I think they do start to understand that it does enhance our ability to provide better service for them more efficiently at a higher level of service by having these tools in place so that they're there when they need it. I think it's been getting a little bit easier to make these kinds of sales. And I think that also comes from believing in it more ourselves as well. The more I believe in our service offering, the easier it is for me to sell it to my clients.
Right. And agreed. And this seamless integration of the Malwarebytes identification and remediation through the Malwarebytes OneView portal that is facilitated through Adigy, that just really gives me a bigger stick. That's been really helpful for me to sell what we offer to them.
Just to remind listeners what started us off on this path, I had to go check my notes on this. We've mentioned a few times the Tim Pearson show, and listeners to the public show may not have the context for what we've been discussing. It's really a worthwhile listen, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback about it. Tim Pearson of Creative Techs shared a lot of his behind the scenes process and some of his numbers on how he presents this to clients and what his offering was. And it really, I think, started me and Jerry and Sam on moving in this direction more fully with some of our offerings. So I had to look back at this. We talked with Tim in July of 2022.
Wow.
So it's been almost a year since we had that conversation, and it's been going really well since then. So I think there's a lot of value there for anybody who's interested in checking that out. You have to be a patron. That's not a publicly available show. We would love to have you join us on Patreon, and you get access to that and dozens of other episodes that we can speak a little more freely because it's behind the paywall. And that's where you can find that. Just go to commandcontrolpower.com and click on support. Become a patron at any level, and you have access to that episode. That was number 471, and many other conversations where it's a little bit more behind the scenes again. Yeah, check that out, and we encourage you to put into effect some of these things we've been discussing, and let us know how they're working for you, how these kind of structures work, and your success with pitching these to clients, because we'll keep you posted as well as we all go down this road. And yeah, thanks, Jerry, for the check-in on how things have been going with your pricing model, because I think it's very encouraging to know that you've had a lot of good uptake on that.
Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to put in a little plug for Adigy, just while we're speaking of Adigy. Recently, I went out of the country with my family. We took a little break, and we went to Amsterdam. And this was a trip that was put off just when COVID hit, and we were going to go to Amsterdam and go to some of the museums and go to see the Anne Frank house, and really was something that was long overdue for us. So we took a trip to Europe, and that was a lot of fun. It wasn't very long. I think we spent 7 nights in Europe, and we took a 2-day trip to Belgium. And so how does Adigy factor into all of this? Adigy doesn't have a iOS client, but you can get to your Adigy portal through just the regular browser, whether you're using Chrome or Safari on your iOS device. So we have a client back here in Connecticut, and they have a creative team, and the creative team is remoting into their Mac studios in the office using RDP, because that's just the way their infrastructure is set up. So they need a remote desktop client to RDP, and they're using one that's proved to be generally reliable for us. It's from a company called NuoRDS, spelled NuoRDS.com. So most recently, we've been running into an issue where every day they can't remote into their computer. Who knows why? And I've tried to solve it, and we were doing things like changing Ethernet adapters and patch cables, seeing if there was anything that was causing them disconnect for them. But what resolves it is a restart. And with Ventura, you can't reschedule a restart, a daily restart through the GUI. That's gone. Who knows why? But you could do it through the command line. And so I'm using a third-party piece of software to do that. But before I actually found that third-party piece of software to do the scheduled restart, I was on vacation. So adjusting for the time change, I'd get pinged by both people who needed to get remote access, and they were looking for a machine restart. And without fail and with complete reliability, I was able to log into my Adigy portal in Amsterdam and restart these computers every day for them.
Nice. The question you'd ask me is, were you on a rooftop in Amsterdam in this case?
I was not on a rooftop. However, I was in a Uber. Trains were on strike. We spent 2 days in Belgium, and we had to get to this town in Belgium called Bruges. And the only way we could get there was by Uber because all the cars were already rented out because of this train strike. So I ended up taking a 400 euro Uber ride with my family to Bruges.
Whoa, that had to sting. Wow.
So I was in an Uber heading to Belgium and was able to remotely restart both of those machines.
Amazing.
Is that better than being on a rooftop?
Yeah, I think that'll be a new segment. We used to have the rooftop in Spain segment. Now we have the Uber in Belgium segment. It is amazing what you can do remotely from anywhere. And it adds to your quality of life to be able to offer those kinds of things to your clients, because for you, you can take a trip like that without thinking everyone's going to be totally unsupported, high and dry for the week that you're gone. You know that they're still protected, and you don't have to call on me or Sam to try and get up to speed with what's going on and then try and intervene and all that. You can do it mobile, right from your iPhone or iPad. It's fantastic. That's awesome that worked out for you. That's really cool.
And the listeners will probably ask, what was the piece of software that I'm using? I'm using Power Manager from a company out of the UK called dssw.co.uk. DSSW, and they make this product called Power Manager, and I think it's $12 for the year, so it's subscription based, but well worth the value there. Yep, nice. $12.95 for every 12 months. So happy to pay the license and not have to remotely restart these computers every day. I'd like to leave you with a humorous story. Pay-as-you-go client, mom and pop, elderly. They called me in to get their new iMac going. They attempted a migration, and once I got there, they didn't migrate in the correct account. They had two accounts. Sometimes it's John Doe, and then there's John B. Doe, and they look at them, and Apple may help them over the phone to onboard it, and inevitably the wrong identity is picked, the wrong home folder, and it takes them 5 minutes, and they're like, oh, that was quick. Yeah, you didn't migrate the gigabytes of data that you really should have. That should have taken hours to do. Right. So we come on site, and I said, here's what we got to do. I'm going to hook up the cable, and we're going to move all the data in that you didn't do. And this is not going to be a problem. We're just going to do scorched earth and just start over, and we'll migrate in the correct account. And along the way, the client was saying, like, I really don't need anything in there. I said, yeah, but you've got some pictures and you've got some documents. And once we do this and we erase your old iMac, then that data is gone. You don't have a backup. So I think we need to do this just as a best practice way to move forward. And I'm not going to charge you for it. I'm going to leave you with the cabling. I'm going to come back. We'll just onboard it really quickly and you'll be good to go. He calls me a few hours later and he said, yeah, I canceled the migration. And
why?
I said, why did you do that? I could hear his wife in the background, and his wife is starting to berate him. And she's saying things like, he's impatient. I told him not to do this. And the gentleman said back to me, I saw that I was checking up on the progress and I saw it still had 2 or 3 hours to go. Why did you do this?
If you saw it had 2 or 3 hours to go, it still doesn't explain why. So why did you cancel it still? What?
Yeah, I picked up my cables, charged him for that return visit, tried to get him back on track a little bit. He abandoned the migration and he insisted that he didn't want the data. Wow. Sometimes you can lead a horse to water, but you can't inevitably make them drink. This is probably going to be okay for you, but understand that it's like you're walking down the street and your pants are half on and your pants are half off. You got one leg, one of the pants, and you're holding up with one hand, but the other one still hasn't gotten the other leg in. So this is kind of like where you're at. And he said, that's fine.
That's fine. He said, I walk down the street all the time with one pant leg out.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the